So now, in this particular session, we will try to understand regarding the validation transformation. So the validation transformation plays a major role in especially in data quality projects. So I think you're able to see my screen. So we have started actually a validation transform. So validation transformation is a downstream transformation. So normally it will be used at the end of the entire mapping logic within an SAP BODS. So because normally the validation is nothing but you will try to identify valid records and invalid records. After all, applying all the required data quality enhancement technique, if you are able to find out any particular invalid records, those invalid records can be identified with the valid transformation, and those invalid records will be sent to the source team. Again, they will correct those and again they will send back to us. This is what actually the cycle it will go up continuously in the data quality or data enhancement projects. So, like when I say data enhancement projects, the projects where you may identify that the data is wrong. So when I say data is wrong, I will give you a big example or a very, very basic example. So we have a field called country. The field is US. For US, you know that. So we have something called as the 5-digit is a postal code - 4-digit. Either the postal code 2. So full postal code means 5-digit - 4-digit. That is the full postal code of US. So either you need to have a first half or you need to have a full as a postal code. So that is what normally the postal code, like how actually it will be designated in the US. Let us take an example. So now there are some instances where maybe the postal code may wrong. Maybe, like if I say 5 length, it can be 5-digit. Maybe it can be alphanumeric. It can be all or, like alphabets. That can be anything. But you know that if it is a US, then US you will have, like the 5-digit is the the normal way of, representing the PIN code in US. So whatever may be the PIN code you have, if it is not a 5-digit, other than the 5-digit value, then you will say that that particular record is wrong. So it is violating the data quality, the parameters. So you have to identify those number of records. So and you have to send the records to the source team so that the source team will update the respective record with the valid 5-digit postal code. Then I will proceed with my rest of the ETL process or project, whatever it may be. So that is what actually happens. So at the end, you have done a lot of data conversions. You did a lot of data validation and all and everything. So finally, you have to identify after implementation of all the data quality techniques, if you have such kind of requirements, if such kind of incidents, if you are able to identify those, will we need to send it to the source team so that the source team will analyze it and they will update it, and again they will send back to us. I mean to say as a source. So why we are doing all these things, why we are following this particular cycle is to make sure that all our data, will be data enriched. I mean to say all our data will be properly rectified so that it will follow the data enrichment process, and we will achieve the proper data quality implementation of your project. So that is what actually happens with the validation transformation. Because we are doing, all the validation checks at the end, that's the reason why it is called the downstream transformations. So if you observe, if you remember the case transformation. In case transformation, what actually we did, whatever the source records, I mean to say source number of fields, entering into the case transformation, the number of columns getting out of a case transformation are same, whatever may be the number of targets we have. So that is what actually we have understand in the case transformation. But whereas in the validation transformation, so so we have maybe so we can have a same number of columns while coming out of a validation transformation. We can have a more number of columns. We can have a less number of columns. So that is what actually happens. So may not and may change the source and target schemas in terms of number of columns are considered actually. So like what we did in the case transformation, so in validation transformation also we have to write a the rules. We have to write a logic. So earlier, if you remember that we have written like something called as where the product category is beverages, where the product category is produce. So that is a different types of rules that we have written whenever we have discussed the case transformation. But whereas in the validation also we are going to do the same, but we will see that what is the difference between the validation transformation and the case transformation. So the basic idea, the basic identification of the validation transformation would be we have to write a condition again. So here we say that a rule. So for that particular rule, we are giving a name. So the condition and the rule will the name will be given to that particular condition that is called as a rule. So here the validation transformation works similar to like an AND operator, whereas the case transformation, if you remember, so we have something called as a default label others, where whatever the conditions it is not satisfying, the default else part will be taken care by the case transformation there. But whereas in the validation transformation it works on the AND operator, we will see the difference. What is the difference between the validation transformation and the case transformation? So I'm trying to refer, here an example of a 5-digit zip code pattern. So there are some records, like maybe like 1,000 records or maybe 200 records. Out of that, a few records I wanted have, modified with the wrong the zip code for the US. So my idea would be to, separate those records. So whenever those records are following the 5-digit pattern, send those records to pass. If they are not following the pattern, send the records to failure. So and there is a third that is called the rule violation. So what is the field it got actually rule got violated? What is the field name? Whether it is zip code or something else. So what is the rule and what is on which field actually the rule got violated? So all these things that you will be able to understand in this particular the rule violation, I mean to say in validation transformation. Now it's a time for us to jump onto the server and we will see the example. So almost in today's session, so we will completely focus on the validation transformation because validation transformation is very important. And you may have to use regularly in the data enrichment projects. Do you have any questions till now? Yes, please carry on.
So the prerequisite for a validation transform is, does it need to be just before the target table, or it can be in between the whole data flow?
It can be in between. It can be in between. When I say in between, so you have to identify that. So let us take an example that this is what your data flow. Okay. So when you say in between, you are expecting that after this table, after this particular pass table, you are expecting one more continuation of the flow. That is what you are expecting here. When I say data flow, when I say, like in between the data flow.
Maybe yes.
Okay, great. So whenever you have gone to this particular end, loading into the table, that is the end of the flow. Getting my point? What I mean to say? In the data flow, whatever may be the job you are trying to design, if you have achieved till this point loading into the, I mean to say the target table, that can be staging table, that can be target table, that can be anything. If you have loaded into any particular table, that is the end of your data flow, that's it. If you want to continue further, you can take this particular table as a source. Getting my point, what I mean to say here? And follow in the next data flow.
Okay. So
if you remember earlier also, we have gone through one scenario like this. So I have defined actually the two two data flows actually. One is dependent on another. If you remember in the case transformation, I guess, right? In the case transformation, initially we have loaded into the staging in the first data flow, and in the second data flow, I have taken the the first data flow as a source and first data the staging table as a source, and I have loaded into the different target the table. That's what we did.
Okay. So my question is this: so can there be a query transform after the validation transform?
Oh yeah, we can have any number of the combinations are possible, not a problem.
Okay.
Okay, so that is possible, but the point here is, so what you want to achieve it. So that is very important. So that is possible even after the validation transformation also, but you want to identify that whether it is a pass, whether it is a failure, or whether it is a rule violation, whether you want to achieve it or not, and all and everything, that you have to see that.
Okay.
Now, so having this particular knowledge, now we will jump on to the validation transformation here. So we have something called as JB underscore validation transform. So now as usual, so I'm trying to create a workflow here. So workflow, so validation transform (6 a.m. IST). So we have data flow. So I have defined now a job, so within the job workflow and data flow. Now, as I mentioned previously, so I need to have a table where it has a invalid records. So here I already have one table, so that is called as an order underscore version V1. So if I expand, there are like, so 834 records I have, like with an order ID, customer ID, employee ID, and all those stuff. Out of these records, few records are having the invalid records. So how they are invalid records? See here. For this particular order ID, so we have something called as ship country. Ship country is US. For this particular ship country, so what is the ship postal code we have? See here, we have something called H1L1B. We have H1L1B and H1L1B-8372. These are the three records. They are all like identified as invalid records. So we will now see that. So how actually I can route those? I can route these records using the validation transformation, and how we can proceed further with that. Now, so as usual, I have simply drag and drop the source table, what I'm expecting here. So after that, I'm going to use the query transformation here. So simply to drag and drop. So what are the fields that you need to have? I need to have all. So simply drag and drop here. And so yes, please.
sorry, Venkat, I got a question. If I want to update the table orders underscore V1, can I do it here writing any SQL statement?
Okay, great. So if you want to update, you have to call the statements. That's it. That will automatically will call in the source. Getting my point? What I meant to say here? So let us take an example that if you want to write an update statement, you can write an update statements. So BODS will call those update statements, but we cannot directly do that. When I say update, so for each and every record you want to update, or else you want to change it, or it's all depends, right? That's what I mean to say. So let us take an example that yes, these are the records. So first of all, we have to identify what are all the ship postal codes having these records. First thing. And next thing is, if you want to pass any universal, what do you call as value for this. Let us take an example that you have identified that H1L1B1 is a value. So it is not following the pattern. So in query transformation, what you can do is, you can say that if it is not following the pattern, make it as a null. That we can do that.
Okay. But is there any way that I can write a simple SQL statement, let us say update ship postal code, from the table where ship name equal to something?
Okay. Where order name is something, right?
Yeah.
If that is the case, you have to know before front itself. You have to know that. Okay, what do you know? What are all the order IDs? Got invalid the ship postal code. If you know that, you can write it. Okay. But normally that is not practically possible, right? So we don't know how many records will come up in the source system. So that's the reason why normally we don't do that at all. Normally if it is a mass update, like changing the flag. So when I say mass updates, irrespective of the, the ship postal code values, if you want to update something, maybe the flags Y to N or N to 1, N to Y. If you want to update such kind of requirements, then normally you can go for the update statements. Okay, in data services. Now I have orders underscore V1, and we have a query. So now, we have an order ID, customer ID, and employee ID, and we have something called a ship country. And as I mentioned previously, there are like 3 records we have where the ship postal code is got wrong here. So now I'm using the validation transformation. Here now in today's session you will get a complete idea of like how many different ways actually we are going to do a the data enrichment, the techniques, data enrichment, the activity. So now I have simply drag and drop the validation transformation. See here the validation transformation, the symbol icon, see here one input and several outputs, and you will see that there is a tick mark even, so validation. So now in the validation transformation, so as I mentioned previously, so we have something called as a validation rule, okay, and what is the name, what is the condition has to be given in the validation rule. So that is what actually happens here. So when I say validation rule, on which the field actually have to write a validation rule. So that is a very important point here. So I have to give a validation rule on the ship postal code. So when I say validation rule, I have to give it. So I will give a validation, rule on this particular ship postal code. So as I mentioned previously, so in the validation, the transformation, so there are like the standard steps have to be followed. So what are those standard steps actually? So identify viewer, identify valid field where you have to validate it, and second one is define the validation rule. So in the validation rule, actually, so what you can do is, you can define the condition. And validation can be done in two ways actually. So one is called as with an existing, with the default validation functions, and with custom validated functions. With custom validation functions. So I mean to say, like, so if you have any validation functions, so we can make use of an existing, or like the BOD is given default validation functions. If you don't have a default validation functions, or if they are not satisfying your requirement, you can create your own custom validated validation functions, and we can proceed from there. So that is what actually happens with the default validation functions and custom validation functions. In this particular session, we will see the both. So with the default validation functions, so what BODS has given us, with the help of that, we will proceed further. And also we will see that the already defined custom validated function, that is I have created. So we will make use of that custom validation function, and we will proceed further with the same activity. So now, we will define a validation rule. See here, so this is a validation rule that I am going to define here. And below, I am going to write a rule if the record got a failure. When I say record got a failure, if the record is not satisfying the condition, then where it has to go. So that is what actually happens. And here, mainly we have three types of outputs. So send to pass table, or send to fail table, or send to rule violation table. These are the three mainly target, the table, the target output, so that you will achieve out of a validation transformation. Whereas in the case transformation, you can have any number of data targets, any number of the target tables, depends upon the root of your records. But whereas in the validation transformation, we have mainly default three. One is called the pass table, and second one is called the failure table, and third one is called the rule violation table. So when any particular records got satisfied the validation rule, then those records will tend to pass. There are some instances where the customer will also needs to wants to have the failure records also into the pass, that we will see that. So, but if any particular records are not satisfying the validation rule, then they will by default send to failure. There are some instances where so the failure records, even though it is a failure, even though they are passed, send both into the one place, pass and failure. So that is a different, the three types of different, the possibilities of loading into the target system that we will see now. Now, so we have something called as a validation rule. See here, whenever I say validation rule, it will say that what is a validation. So rule underscore the zip validity, zip code validity. So here, so actually as I mentioned previously, so I have something called as validation function, I have something called as a column function. So I can have two, either I can select column validation, or else I will select a validation function. So validation function is basic use means whatever the function that is available. So, so you have to select that particular validation function. So that can be custom function. So that what exactly you have defined, we can select that. Another one would be like something called as a validation function. See here in the validation function, you will select an appropriate column and you will define a condition. So that can be an equal or greater than, that can be match pattern, set exists in the table or any particular custom condition. So what are maybe the things that you are going to write a condition? So basically of validation function and the column function. When I say column function, we can make use of an existing function. See here, the match pattern is an existing function. So we can make use of an existing function in the column validation. And if you are not satisfied with the conditions what you have, you were able to see here, so you can always check this checkbox and you can write your own custom functions, and you can make use of this particular identification of the past records. That is what actually happens here. Now, so I'm initially will proceed with the column validation here, and we will proceed from there. And we have something called as match pattern. In the match pattern, I'm giving 999 to 5 nines. Okay. So what it is saying, action on failure. If any records got a failure, then send to failure. That is what actually I mentioned here by default. But what are the other options we have? Send to pass and send to both. I mean to say send to failure in case of a failure, send to pass in case of a pass also. So both. So send failure records in case of a failure. Send pass records in case of a pass. Send to both means send failure records to pass table or even to the failure table. That is what I mean to say. So I will tell you like in detail, not a problem. So now what I did actually here, so I'm sending it to when you say regular expressions, what do you mean by say that? So here when I say pattern, like I want to understand that each and every digit should be each and every the character should be an digit. That's what I have to make sure that. So that's the reason why I'm just giving like the match pattern. The value should be matched with the pattern. So that is what I have mentioned here. So 99959. Okay.
When I was mentioning regular expressions, Venkat, it is more like validating phone numbers, validating the email addresses and stuff like that. Can I use a regular expression? If you see, many of the tools allow you to use regular expression pattern recognition.
Got it. Yeah. So let us take an example that so you have something called as the 10-digit number also, right? So sometimes
social security number.
Phone number. Yeah. Right. The phone number. So what you can use the same pattern even. Yeah, the 3-digit hyphen. After that another 3-digit, maybe after that maybe 4-digit, something like that. So you can give that, not a problem. So what are maybe the pattern? Instead of 9999, you can give 999 hyphen 999 hyphen another 4 nines. Getting my point? What I mean to say here?
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Chandra? Okay. So now, I have just simply mentioned a validation rule, and I have simply identified the respective, the column on which I have to identify or I have to define a conditional validation rule. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply load it into the target system. That's it. As I mentioned previously, how many are possible here? So the possible are something called as valid, you can say that a zip, and we have something called as invalid zip. So we have something called as rule violation. So actually I have mentioned like 3. Okay. So because in case transformation we have to define a separate labels to have. So for each and every table you have to associate with a the respective label. But here in the validation transformation, there is no need to associate, there is no need to define any particular labels. By default, it will come up with a 3 label: call pass, call failure, call plus rule violation, something like this. The failure, something like this, rule violation. That's it. So let us take an example that so let me clarify here. So let us take an example that we have something called one more, something like the pass one, that is table. See, let us try to combine. See here, you can have one more. So basically we can have only 3 types of labels are possible here. Okay, whether it is a pass, whether it is a failure or rule violation. But how many number of data targets that you want to have, that's your wish. Maybe I can have one more pass, maybe I can have one more failure, maybe I can have one more rule violation. It all depends. But I can have only 3 types of labels are possible here. That is one thing. So let us take an example that I have something called as a query transformation. So see here, even if for the query transformation also, what are the records that I am trying to pass here? I am trying to pass only maybe the pass, maybe the failure, maybe the rule violation. Okay. After routing the pass records to the query transformation, still you want to do any particular the manipulations, you can always do that. Yes, please. Somebody has asked something.
So Venkat, my question is this. So we can achieve the same results using the case transform, right?
Very good point. Yes. Yes. So that we will see that. Okay. So we will see the difference between the case transformation and the validation transformation. But what is the difference? That we will see that. Okay. So now, we will see that in orders. So we have identified, like we have defined the query transformation. So because in fact the query transformation here is not mandatory, but as a best practice I normally use a query transformation, because if I have to add anything, so if I have to define anything, hard code anything, convert anything, maybe on the fly, so I normally use query transformation. Okay, so that's the reason why I've just mentioned the query transformation. Other than that, it is not mandatory to use that. And there are the 3 the table outputs that we are able to achieve here. So now I'm just trying to execute the job, and let us see what actually happens here. So whether we got a success or failure. If it is failure, what is the reason for the failure? Great. So we have see here itself it still says that the pass validation zip has 0. Okay, invalid has 834 records and rule violation has 834 records. So we have to debug whatever the condition that we have written, that is it seems to be wrong at some place. So where actually we have gone wrong, so that's where actually we have to take it. So what I'm expecting actually, at least the 3 will go to the failure and remaining will go to the pass. That's what I have assumed. But seems to be everything got wrong, everything has gone wrong, and 0 records got routed to the pass. So it says that everything is failure. So the condition what we have written is wrong somewhere, right? So that's the reason why again I have to go to the validation transformation, edit the rule, and I have to identify where I have gone wrong. See here. So on which column actually I have to write a condition? I have to write a condition on the postal code, right? So that's the reason why it got a failure. Now see here, whenever I have defined any particular rule violation, I mean to say rule validation rule, you will see a symbol here, tick mark. Okay, so now execute. Now see how many records we have. 417 records. See here. But how many I'm expecting actually? Three I'm expecting into the failure. But I see that there are some 417 records I have. I have the 417 records are in the failure and 417 records in the rule violation. Again, there is some problem. So what is the problem? See here, these are all the paths somewhere. But if you see here the failure, so what is the reason for the failure? The failure would be something like okay. So we have something like Brazil. So Brazil, the ship postal code is something like this. We are not sure. Maybe this is the correct the ship postal code. But whatever the fields that I'm referring, they are not Brazil, right? So what are the fields that I'm referring? They are US. So what we have to do in order to identify further? So I have to just filter on it because the ship country is US, right? Whatever the records that I have earlier modified, those are all related to the US. But because of the condition what I have mentioned here, maybe from a logic standpoint, maybe this is wrong. But for Brazil, this particular ship postal code is correct. So that's the reason why I have made a mistake of not defining the filter in the where clause. So now, whenever I have defined a condition in the where clause where, so please filter out only the USA related records. So because this is what my requirement, I'm just trying to tell you. There are like a lot of requirements where maybe the customer says that except US, so you can also have any other the thing, and later on you can merge it. That is also possible. You can also do that. So see here now. How many are there in the failure? See here. Now, because all these three are related to the US, now it says that ship postal code where it is having a other than the 5 digits, then it will show you here in the failure. The schema into the validation is having how many fields actually? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we have a 15 columns. Those are all, like entering into the validation schema. But what are the output? See here, these are all the default 3 output schemas it is actually giving. One is called as the validation path, second one is the validation failure, and third one is called as the validation rule violation. So see the schema out from the validation transformation and the schema called validation rule validation. See here, it has only 3. But whereas here, how many we have? Apart from the 15, so we have additional 3 in the rule, the validation failure. And in the validation pass, what we have? We have 15 actually here. Like this. So this is called the validation pass, validation failure, and the rule violation. So that's the reason why that I have mentioned initially. So for the validation transformation, the schema in may or may not be equal to the schema out in terms of number of columns are considered. So whereas in the case transformation, there is no other way. The input, like the schema, like input to the case transformation is same as an output in terms of the number of columns are considered. Basically here the labels we don't have to define. Those are all the default labels, pass, failure, and rule violation. But these labels are for how many tables you want to associate and all, it all depends upon your requirement. So now I just did a basic, validation rule, how actually the typical validation rule will help. But there are some scenarios where customer says that, so till now what we did is we have just, routed or maybe identify the invalid records and send it to the failure table by default. But some customer says that please send the records to failure. Please send the records to, please send the records to pass even if it is a failure record. Like this. Now, the customer says that, like I want to have everything in a single place. I don't want to have some records in the different table because they are invalid records. So have a solution. If these are all like invalid records, so please substitute with some value. So that is what actually it says that. See here. So if any particular rule got violated, and if we are sending the record to the pass table instead of a failure table, then so what we can do is we can replace that particular expression with that particular value with some expression actually, like this. You can do that. Now just try to execute the job. Let us see what actually it is trying to do here. Now how many records we have in the failure? No records, because I have mentioned saying that even if it is a failure record, please send it to pass. But while loading into the pass, please replace it with question mark, like this. So that is what actually it is trying to do here. So similarly, in the rule violation, see here, for this rule violation, it will tell you, okay, so what is the column name and on which, what is the rule that I have mentioned here. Okay, so rule violation will give you a default, like analysis on which column actually you have written, on which column actually, so you have, applied which validation rules that you have applied. So that information that you will get it in the rule violation table. So getting my point, what I mean to say here, guys? So please say yes in the chat if you are getting my point. So till now you guys are clear about this? Okay, thank you very much, Chandra. And so now, so we have a lot more options here in the validation transformation. So the options are, the customer may say that, no, I want to have failure records also should be sent to the pass and also should be sent to the failure. Like this. I mean, it is sent to both. If the records are sent to both, and if the record is coming to pass table, then obviously I will say that replace with question mark. See here, in the past, I have records with question mark. In the failure, I have records because these are all failure records. And see here, we have three additional, the columns are coming up in the failure table. DA underscore error action, DA underscore error columns, and DA underscore row ID. So these are the three we have. See, what is the action on failure? I have mentioned in the send to both. Because it is a send to both, here it is saying B as an error action. See here, on which column actually the validation rule got a failure? So on the ship postal code. So this is how actually we are going to get a detailed analysis regarding what is the rule and on which field actually the rule got violated or not and everything. So let us take an example that, so I also want to define one more. So one more is, if there is a postal code and the postal code is null, if the postal code is null, maybe if the ship, maybe the country is null, maybe. Let us take an example. Let us identify whether we have any invalid records in that way or not. So we have USA, and in the USA, yes, please.
I have a question. So right now you're validating a postal code which is of length, 5 characteristics, and if it's not equal to 5 characteristics, or if it's not, five digits, and if it has characteristics, you're loading into a failure, and you're also doing a rule validation table. But my question is, let's say it has, 5 numbers, okay, but the 5 numbers are not a valid zip code within US. Let's say you have 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, something like that. If you have that is an invalid postal code, but the country is correct and the number of digits are correct. How do we do that? I mean, there are thousands of zip codes. How do you validate that zip code is correct?
Right. I understand your point. So there are some the scenarios, like let us take an example that we have, as I mentioned previously, so we have the 5. So you understand that, like the 5 digit you have given, but still the ship postal code is wrong because those are all, like digits, right?
Correct.
So if that is the case, you can write your own custom function.
Okay.
So you can write your custom function. So the custom function can be, I will show you like custom function where it is and all. So in the custom function, you can write your own condition. So what could be the first? So you will have some idea, right? So what should be the first? I mean, this is the first, the ship postal code in general. So it will not, maybe I'm not sure whether it will start with 1 or like the 2 or 3 or 4 for the US. Okay, maybe it will start with maybe 8 or 7 or something like that. So it depends upon your requirement. You can write the custom code. So the custom code, like let us take an example that I already am about to show you the custom, like the custom function. So this is a custom function. See here. So something like, so we are taking some ASCII value of the first digit, and we are verifying whether it is less than, like the 48, and it is, like the greater than, it is greater than 57 and less than 48. It has to return 0, something like that. So getting my point? If it is the first value. If you feel that the first value should be 1 or 2 or 3, you can have the respective, the comparison can be done. So I think you guys are aware of an ASCII code. For each and every digit, symbol, a character, we have one ASCII value. So it depends upon that ASCII value. So whatever may be the value that you are trying to achieve it, the first one, so you can identify those will be the valid reports. So getting my point, what I'm trying to say, Raju, here?
Yeah, but let's say we have a table, right, from the source system which gives all the US zip codes, right? Is there a way that we can validate against that table and then load it into this table? Or is there that separate?
Yes. See here. So earlier I have mentioned like see here. So let us take an example that so this is the ship postal code, right? Coming from the orders underscore V1. There is a second table where we only have the ship postal code. Let us take an example. Getting my point? What I mean to say?
Correct.
So what you can say is if this particular value, the ship postal code coming from the order underscore 1 exists in the table.
Okay.
What is the table? You can give the table. Getting my point? What I mean to say?
Okay.
This is the table. Let us take an example. what is a field actually.
Okay.
Getting my point? What I mean to say? Let us take an example that so we have the table. What is the table? Like something like the serial number. We have something called as the zip code. The serial number 1. If you say like 87012 and 2, something like that. Getting my point? What I mean to say here actually? Yeah, maybe 3. Something like this. So we are what we are trying to do here. We are creating a respective data store, and we are selecting the respective table here and selecting the respective column. So getting my point? If the value is there in that particular field, then only you are going to load the data. Getting my point? What I mean to say?
Yeah. So we can have multiple.
As a pass.
We can have multiple validation rules, right? Like, first we'll validate.
Yes. See here. Yes. See here. So we can have a multiple validation rule on the same column. Yes, we can do that. But but prior to 4.0, I mean to say the BODS 4.0, we don't have that option. We can create, we can do, or we can define only one validation rule on the one column at a time. Getting my point? But from 4.0 onwards, there is a the freedom for us to define a more than one validation rule on the same field.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, and let us take an example that. So I have a question for you guys. So if I have defined one more rule on the ship postal code saying that null. So please identify null also a failure record. Then I have defined one more rule here where my ship postal code is null. So how actually BODS will identify? I mean to say BODS will take ship postal code pattern where it is not following 9999 plus where it is not following the null. It will take AND operator or it will take OR operator. What?
It will take an AND.
What I'm asking here. Yes, please.
It will take AND.
Right. So that is the basic difference between the very fundamental difference between the case transformation and the like the validation transformation. So if you have defined a validation transformation on the same field, if you say that where the ship postal code is only the pattern is 999, that is one condition. And if I define the same the different condition on the same like the column where it says that where the ship postal code and we are saying that it is a null, so then it will take an OR operator. But whereas you will say for validation transformation it will take up an AND operator. So it will identify the records of pass if they are following the proper pattern plus if they are not null. It will consider both the conditions. That's the reason why. So in my PPT, I have mentioned the validation transformation works similar to an AND operator, whereas the case transformation will work similar to like a, like what I meant to say, OR operator. So that is a basic fundamental difference. But you will get a doubt. Why can't we, identify, or why can't we write the same logic for the case transformation we can apply? Yes, not a problem, we can apply. So not at all a problem. But how you are going to route it? So which record has to send it and which record has to pass it? So that is a major complex part of what actually we have to identify. So what is to replace and all and everything. Okay, we can easily send to the pass and failure, but we won't be able to get an analysis out of it. What is the condition on which field it got a failure? So we want to understand all those stuff also. There are some, because we have only the 800 records. What happens if you have billions of records, we are trying to do a validation transformation, or we are trying to validate the records. In such instances, so we need to have a requirement where the requirement should fulfill us, like by identifying on which fields actually the rule is getting violated. So we need to get all this information, the first-hand information, and you will get all the information with validation transformation. So case transformation is only will route the records, whereas the validation transformation, it not only routes the records as per the business logic, it will also gives you the the first-hand information of the data profiling. In fact, this is the first step of your data profiling. If you are trying to implement in your project, in your company, if you are trying to implement any master data management, MDM projects, normally if you are trying to implement any data enrichment projects, you have to make use of a validation transformation. Okay, the case transformation is very rarely you are going to use it. So where you are going to route the records as per the language, as per the country, if you want to route it, and if you want to apply any address cleanse or geocoding or data cleanse. In such instances, normally we are going to use a case transformation. So having this the very basic understanding is the validation transformation. Now we will see that few more options. So what we have. So till now, so what we have defined, so we have defined something called as a validation transformation, so as one of the basic types. But like a lot of customers, they say that I'm not satisfied with what actually the BODS is giving. So these are all the the inbuilt the conditions or characteristics, but I don't want to have. I want to write my own statement. I want to write my own condition. I want to write my own the function, so that I will have a control over what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to filter it out, and what I'm trying to identify the validness and invalidness of the records. Now for that, customer like BODS has given one more, that is called as a validation function. So in the validation function, so we can have the validation functions that can be defined within an SAP BODS local repository. So where actually you are going to define the validation functions. So validation functions are of two types again. The validation functions are of two types again. So validation functions are of two types. So one is called as locally created functions. Locally created means in your local repository belonging into the BODS designer. And another one is called as the information steward. Information steward. So you know that in information steward also what actually we are going to give, we are going to measure 8 types of data quality dimensions like completeness, uniqueness, consistency, all those stuff. So in order to do that, definitely you are going to define some functions. You are going to maybe you are going to write some custom functions in the information steward. If you are using the functions, those are defined in the information steward, then you can import those into your SAP BODS. That is one option. Second one is you can always come here and you can right click here and you can create a new validation function here. See here whether it is a validation function, and enable parallel execution is different, that we will see that. So that's related to the performance enhancement. But this is a place actually, okay? So we have to go to the local object library, right click on the validation function and click on new. This is a place actually we have to create. That we will see more while discussing regarding the custom functions topic. Now right click on the existing validation zip code. I already created one, the custom function here. So in the custom function actually, so this is what actually I have defined here. I have defined something called as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have defined 5 local variables here actually. So we have different types of variables. Like one is called as global variable, and second one is called as a local variable. So while defining the custom function, we are going to use the local variables very much, and also we are going to use something called as parameters, input parameters and output parameters. So these are the two types of parameters we are going to define it. So here the basic idea is because my digits are 5, so that's the reason why I have just initially made it like an ASCII value of substring of zip2 value 2. Okay, so this zip2 value 2 is my, see here, zip2 value 2 is the parameter. So this particular parameter, what it will take, every function, like it will expect some input. So the zip2 value 2 is the parameter where it expects input. What is our input? My input would be what you call as my field name, like the zip ship postal code is the input. So that value will be substituted against this particular parameter, and whenever I say substring, it will take the substring of first length, that is first digit character it will take up, and then so it will what you call as perform an ASCII identification, ASCII number it will give you, and after that it will compare what is an ASCII range, and so depends upon that it will return a respective form. Okay, something like that. If you feel that if the first one would be an 8 in your maybe it should start with an 8. So then that would be your requirement. If the first one is not 8, then that is not a value. So you can also say like that. Okay, so these are all like if the custom function given by the BODS is not like applicable or not fulfilling your requirements, you can define your own custom functions and you can do whatever the things that you want to do. That is one thing here. So now, so that is all about the custom function. So how we have defined and all and everything. Now, so I'm using the validation function here. In the validation function, see here the valid zip2, whatever we have locally created the validation function, those will be shown here. The text and validation valid zip2. I will select. See here, what is the like argument? As I mentioned previously, it will ask you what is the parameter that you are going to pass. The parameter that I'm going to pass here is a ship postal code. So just click on OK. See here, the value is now got changed. This postal code. Now we will achieve, we will expect the same, right? So now, so what I have defined? I have defined send to both here. Okay, let's keep the same. So let's click on OK. Execute.
So Venkat, would you be covering these parameters, functions, and everything in LAMP?
Yeah. Parameters and functions, there is separate topic for that. There is separate day for that. Actually, the parameters and functions we will spend one day, okay, for that. The parameters, functions, global variables we will cover. Not a problem, don't worry. So, what we have, see here, the valid records are 125, obviously the invalid records are 3. So now go to your failure records. See here, the failure records are as usual. Because we have set it to send to both, it has error action flag is 8B actually here. And now, so we have sent it to pass, even pass, so it is a question mark. That's it. So we are achieving with our own custom function. So what we have defined, that's it.
Hey Venkat.
So this is, yes please.
Quick question. So for example, if we have a tax software like Vertex, which also does city, state, and zip code combinations, and it validates those 3 fields, can I pass or can I call using a web service or a web API from here to the other software, and based on the return value, I can pass or fail?
Very good point you have raised it. Got it. So let us take an example that you have a, what is that? What is the software that you have mentioned, Chandra?
Vertex.
Vertex, right. So Vertex, like does the cleanse, address cleanse or something like that?
It is actually a geocode, actually address, zip code, city, comma, state, all these three fields, it validates and it assigns a geocode. So based on the geocode, it will calculate the tax. So it is a tax software which sits on top of ECC. There are multiple tax softwares. Vertex is one tax software. So my question is, if we are transferring the addresses from one legacy system to the ECC, and if you have to validate the fields like zip code, can I call the third-party APIs, and then based on the result, can I pass or fail?
Okay, I got your point. Yes. So what you're saying is, yes, the BODS can talk to the web services, that is first thing, whether it is the third-party APIs or whatever it may be. So the only thing is the BODS has to get like the fields in a structured format. If we are going to get a structured format, then what we can do is the BODS can load the data into a table. The BODS can talk to web services, and whatever the records we are going to get in the form of an XML structure. After all, web services underlying the language would be an XML. So the BODS can get a data in the form of an XML, and we have to load the data into the staging, into our maybe any of the data stores. Then, as I mentioned previously, we can use this particular condition where exists in table. Getting my point, Chandra, what I'm trying to refer here? Two steps are there.
No, yes, I understand that. But what if I have an API where I pass these three parameters, I get a true or false value. So if it is true, it means the tax software is saying that this combination of city, comma, state, and zip code is valid. If I get false, then it is an invalidated. So I will not implement all my validations in the BODS software, but I am using BODS to call the third-party API, and based on the return value, pass or fail.
Okay, where actually you are going to return the value? So you are going to return the value like yes or no. Where actually you are going to do that? You are going to do it in the tax software itself?
Yeah, everything will be, so when you call, like as you are saying, the function, right? If you are, instead of calling my own custom function, I'm going to call this API. What it does is it takes three parameters and it returns the value true or false.
Got it. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. If it is return the value yes or no, what you can do is that values for that particular combination can be loaded to any of the table in our local, in our data stores and all. If it is an yes, that combination is, that combination is yes, we can say that there is a pass. If the combination is no, any of the combination is no, that can be city plus maybe zip is yes, maybe the postal code is wrong, the entire thing is wrong. So that is a no. So in that case, wherever the combination is yes, we can say that in BODS, simply yes in the BODS. Yeah, what you said is right. So there are some companies even they does the same, but not exactly what you have mentioned, but in a similar grounds actually. They will implement everything in the outside, not in the BODS. They simply want BODS have to identify whether it is a yes or no. If it is an yes, like we are going to pass a value 1. If it is a no, we are going to pass a value 0. If it is a 1, where the flag is 1, it is a pass record. If it is a 0, then it is a failure record. Yes, there are some instances also. Yes, you're right.
Hey, Venkat, I have a question. So in this case, I have to download the data from web services in the form of XML, and I will load that to my BODS, right? So again, this is not real time, right?
No, obviously everything is not the real time. See, whenever we are talking about in web services, no tool will, will does the real time. No. So what actually you have to do? So before executing this particular job, we have to execute that web service related job in the BOTS. That's it. We cannot do anything, right? So that is what we have to manipulate the thing. That's it. So all the tools are like that only, yes. So nobody is perfect. So we have to make a combination of each and everything.
So we have one. Is there any API in BOTS using that I can directly connect to web services?
There is no API as of such, but like we can directly create a data store. See here, right click, new web service. So we need to have the web service URL.
Understood. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So we need to have that. Okay. So what we're discussing is I'm out of track. Yes. Yes. So this is some actually. So we are going to identify. So we will see like a bit more like, so if I uncheck the score button and if I execute the job, what happens? See here, we are not getting rule violation information here if I disable the score. Similarly here, so I'm not getting any DA underscore error columns and DA underscore Y. Getting my point, what I mean to say here, the score will help you to perform the analysis of your data. After all, validation is altogether a kickstart your profile, kickstart your data enrichment project. Okay, so this is all about, so how actually, what actually we are going to identify the validation rule and validation, the transformation, how to achieve and all and everything.
Venkat?
Yes, please.
Yeah, in this validation transformation, we have option called ignore if it is null.
Right, it's very simple actually. When I say ignore it is null, so what I'm saying here is, so please identify a record where if it is null, please ignore it. Getting my point, what I mean to say here? So okay. That is the main point here. So if the value is null, so please ignore it. That's what I mean to say here. Getting my point?
Okay.
Yeah. It's very simple. So what you can do is you can just try with checking, just please, like pass a value where the zip code is null. In that case, you will check that option, and without checking that option, you can run it. Just simply, like just check that and, run the job. That's it. It will help you.
Okay.
So what will happen, Venkat, if we have ignore if null? It will not consider that particular record for rule validation?
It will not consider the null. Yes, you're right. Okay. There are some instances where, yeah, it won't consider. So, yes. So, can anybody tell me, like, by looking into this particular, like the input zip and rule violation, can we do any analysis further? I mean, the failure table and the rule violation. Can we do any analysis further? So, getting my point?
Yeah, we can always count how many times it's failing, and what is the zip code that is most failing and all that.
I mean to say here, can any of these two tables can be joined?
Which two?
Any of these three, like pass, failure, maybe pass, rule violation, failure, rule violation, can we join? Any combination of two tables, can we join out of these? That's what I'm asking.
If we take, send it to both, probably we can add pass and fail.
Mm-hmm. See here, can you observe rule violation table and the zip code. So out of these two, see here, I could see that there is a DA underscore row ID is common. Okay, so if I am going to join invalid zip table and the rule violation table, then I can get more number of information. Like, so what is the column name on which I have written, and what is the rule violation on which column, what is the rule name, so what is the DA underscore error action. So get my point what I'm trying to refer here, guys. So now, so what I'm going to do is, I want to do more analysis on my data. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to define one more data flow. So one more data flow, something like, so validation transform, it's a rule violation. Okay, so you guys need to tell me whether this particular job is dependent on this particular job or not.
Yes, Venkat, it is dependent.
Why it is dependent?
Because for us to get the data into those final tables, the first job needs to execute.
Right, very good. So that is what actually, so we have to dependent on the first job, because what are my sorts in the second data flow? These two are my sorts, the fail table and the rule violation table in my next data flow. So if the first data flow is loaded, then only my data will come to these two. Because and then the next data flow, I'm going to consider these two as my sources. Getting my point? So that's the reason why it is very important to have a dependency on the first one. And let's go back to my SQL Server, the target SQL Server DB. Go to the template tables, and here we have something called as an invalid zip, and we have something called as a rule violation. Where is that rule violation? Yes. See, because these two are template tables, it is not asking whether it is a source, whether you want me to use as a source or target. By default, it is a source. That's it. So simply consider query. So what do you want to have? So it all depends. So maybe I want to have only these three. And apart from these three, I'm also looking for something like a rule name or column name. That I can mention there, like this. So you can execute the job. Oh, okay, we have to load it, right? So into the final table. Analysis. So now I'm executing the job. Like this. It all depends whether your user is really looking for this analysis or not. It all depends actually. Okay. So getting my point, what we are trying to refer here, guys. So similarly, you can write one more rule on different table, a different different field actually. Maybe you can write the statement saying that maybe ship region is null. Maybe that is also like the failure record. Then it will take up a combination where the ship region is null plus ship region is not a ship postal code is not a pattern. So those two combinations are satisfied, then only those are all failure. If any one of these is success, then it won't be considered as success. If both are success, then it will be a success, otherwise failure. Then in that case, you will clearly understand here. Maybe the ship postal code is successful. Maybe the rule violation is failure because of the maybe ship region. Getting my point? What I mean to say here? That combination is also possible here. So you got my point? What I'm trying to refer here, guys.
Venkat, why are we getting 9 records in the target table?
One second. Why we are getting the target records? 9 records. Okay, great. So please observe carefully here. So earlier, so what we did actually, I'm just trying to load it again and again. So that's the reason why we are getting these values.
Okay.
Okay. See here, so how many records we have in the source, how many records we have in the target, that's all depends. So if, how many we have? We have actually 3 we have.
Mm-hmm.
In the rule violation, how many we have? We have 3 here. Okay. If you observe carefully, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to truncate and delete once again. See here, what it is going to do. Now how many are getting loaded? Again 9. So can anybody tell me we did a mistake? We did a mistake, and again we are getting like in all the possible combinations of records. So we did a mistake.
In the query transform?
Right, in the query transformation. In the query transformation, so we have to write a condition, right? So what actually happens? So DA underscore OID is equal to DA underscore OID. Because we didn't, define the condition here. If we are running the job multiple times, automatically those many number of records will come out. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that is the point. This time you should only 6-3.
Okay.
Okay. So this is how actually we are going to proceed with the validation transformation. So you guys have any points or any doubts in the validation transformation? Chandra and team, Jayendra, Raju and Acharya. Great, great. So Karen, are following me? Karen, Dawn, Mike, are you following me? So are you getting my point? What I mean to say here? Meena, so please say yes. So if you are getting it, so in the chat window. Thank you. So okay guys, so just give me 2 minutes, we will start, okay? So just give me 2 minutes. Hello guys, so the next topic that I'm trying to start here is an extraction of a nested data. So when I say extraction of a nested data, so we will see that how to extract an XML file. What are the different ways of doing an extraction between an XML file and all and everything that we will see that. So I think the example, the nested, the extraction of nested data, I think it will take like about 2-3 hours of time. So the remaining the 15-20 minutes what we have today. So we will try to the focus on to identify what are all the different things that we will going to learn and what are the points that we will discuss and all and everything. So this is our next topic after we have discussed the validation transformation. So an extraction of a nested data. So you all guys know that how actually what is meant by nested data. I don't have to explain you, but the nested data means identification of a hierarchical information with the schema and subschema format. The best example of the nested schema would be something like XML documents and also ERP IDocs. So you guys have already have an experience with SAP core SAP modules. You guys are already felt what is meant by an SAP ERP IDocs and what actually meant by an XML document. How exactly it will show us and all and everything. But the mechanism that XML file or nested data will follow is called as a nested relational data modeling. So where the parent schema will be joined with the subschema. So that is called as a NRDM, the nested relational data modeling. So we will see that what actually meant by that. See here in this example. So we are referring to the sales order. So how actually the nested data will get represented. So that is what we are trying to understand here. The sales order means the line items in the sales order are related to the single sales header. You know that. So in SAP world, we have something called as VBAK and we have something called as VBAP. So VBAK is called as sales header information. VBAP will have a sales header line item information, sales line item information. So one sales header will have several line items. We can have hundreds of line items and we have 2-3 hundreds of line items even. So one sales header. So similarly here, the order number 9999 with customer ID ship 2 and ship 1 and 2 and the same order header, sales header actually is having 2 sales line items with 001, 002 with quantity 24 and with item price 10 and 5. So this is how actually, so we are going to identify the nested structure. So here the line items, here what you're able to see, this is a column. This column itself will have a subschema. This is called as a subschema and this is called as a parent schema. This entire, the table structure that you're able to see here, this entire thing is called as a parent schema, whereas this is called as a subschema. The subschema is part of a parent schema. This is called as an NRDM. Okay, so this is how each row of a sales order line item is nested with the nested line item data. This is how actually the nested data, this is how actually the data in the nested format will be represented actually. So here we have seen a very simple example, but what happens if we have a very complex example with more nested schemas, where we have something called as an order ID, a line item, we have a customer info. So for that, so what we need to understand here, so the identification would be, so we need to have an item, or a line item quantity and item price. Okay. The similarly, so we have the something called as the customer info, where you want to send it, that order. Like who is a ship to customer, who is the bill to customer. So who is that? If it is a ship to customer, so where actually the orders have to be shipped? What is the customer ID here? 1001. Where actually the bill has to be sent? It is a 7777, something like that. For the ship to, who is the contact person? For contact to, who is the contact person? I mean, for bill to, who is the contact person? Here, see here, for bill to, we have two persons here, whereas for ship to, only one person. So this is how actually the nested, the several or multiple nested schemas will be represented like this. So this is the standard way of representing the nested structure universally. The best example would be the XML file. So now with the the XML file extraction within the BODS, there are like several methods actually. So how we can extract the data from? The several methods are like the data in XML file is defined in a nested format. That is one. So data in XML file is stored in two files. If anybody wants to extract the data from, or in general, the data will get stored or data will be represented in XML between two ways. So one is in the header file and second one would be the data file. If we have to extract the data from an XML, so we have to ask the client what is the header data, what is the header file, and what is the data file. So these two are the information that you have to ask for the customer. The header file will be represented in .dtd or .xsd, whereas the data file will be in the .xml. This is a very, very important one. If you have to extract the data from an XML, you have to ask the customer either .dtd header file plus .xml data file, or you have to ask .xsd header file or XML. So these two combinations are you have to expect from the customer. Okay. So similarly, if customer has given, so I will repeat this. So nested data extraction. So mainly actually two types. So where the BODS can extract. So one is called as .dtd, and second one is called as .xsd. I'm referring to the header file first. So when I say .dtd, so I need to have a .dtd file or .dtd header file, or I need to have a .xsd header file. So either one I need to have mandatory. So or if customer asks you to extract data from an XML, so you have to ask what you have to ask. So you have to ask the data. Like either they should give you .dtd, the header file, and .xml data file, that combination, or .dtd header file, sorry, .xsd header file, and .xml data file. These two combinations should be given. If customer has given .dtd file format, so we have to create for .dtd header file. If customer has given .dtd header file, so we need to create DTD file format in BODS. If customer has given .xsd header file, so you need to give XSD file format in BODS. These two are mandatorily you have to take care. Okay. So having this particular knowledge, now, so this is now actually the extraction part, creation of a file format with the help of an XML. So once that is completed, so we have to decide upon whether it is an XML, whether it is a .dtt file format, whether it is a .xsd file format. So anything, which transform you have to use it, whether you have to use query transformation, whether you have to use an XML pipeline transformation, because query transformation is also having capability, to extract the data, the nested data, to generate the nested data. The advantages we have with the query transformation. Okay, so we have the XML pipeline, we have the query transformation. So we will see the 2 or 3 examples with the query and with an XML pipeline. This is what a screenshot that I've given. So what actually you have to mention here. So whenever I say import metadata, so you have to mention what is the DTD file format. So DTD definition we have to give it. After that, we have to select the respective data file. 2 files should be there. One is a .dtt file, file format, and .xml for the data. Similarly, .xsd. These 2 have to be done. There are like several procedures are there. So if you want to, extract the data from the query transformation, what are the steps needs to be taken? These are the steps actually. So we will see that tomorrow, all these things. So if it is an XML file format, so what actually advantages or limitations we have? So how to achieve, how to use a multiple XML, the file formats. So we will see all these things in tomorrow's session. I think tomorrow's session completely we will focus on the XML. Okay. So do you have any questions guys before I hang up the call for today?
So what's DTD and what's XSD?
Yeah, DTD is a file format actually. The way it will what I mean to say is the way the header information or structure of the data will be represented. That is the difference in the DTD. Getting my point? What I mean to say here? So DTD is the header file format of the data, whereas an XSD is also a header file header format of the data. So there are 2 ways of the of representing the header information in the respective files. Earlier in old days we used to use a .dtt. Now all the companies are using .xsd file format in order to represent their header information of an XML. Okay. So
okay.
Yeah. So if you are looking for the expansion and all, you can just Google it. If it's more related to an XML, how to do an XML, how to what is an XML, what is the difference between a .dtt and .xsd. I mean to say that is purely from the XML standpoint, not from the BODS standpoint. From the BODS standpoint, what is how to extract, what are the different types of an XML, the header, the files, what BODS can extract. That is very important for us. Any questions, guys?
Venkat, what is mean by downstream transform?
So downstream transformation means like let us take an example that in today's session we have seen like validation transformation, right? In the validation transformation, so we have used the validation transformation at the end. I mean to say in the data flow.
Okay.
So where actually we have used, so we have used the validation transformation at the end actually, I mean to say, right? This is an end part. So before that, so after that it is simply loading into the target, right? This is called the downstream actually. So it depends upon the usage. So we have just defined like categorically like in different format. Categorically, we would divide it again. The transform.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Any questions, guys? You want to ask?
Venkat, I have a question. If we have multiple workflow inside one job, and if I trigger the job, then
Can you repeat? No, your voice is very low, Jane. Can you be louder, please?
if I have multiple workflows in a single job, okay, and
Okay.
and there is not any dependency, if I trigger the job, execute the job, then how this different workflow will execute?
No, your voice is low, Jane. Low, Jane. Can you be a bit louder, please?
Yeah, my question is I have a job and there are multiple workflows inside that, okay, and these workflows are not related to each other. So I am now executing the job, and how these workflows will trigger? Will it trigger at a time, or how does it happen?
Got your point. Yes. Yes. If you have two workflows in a job, and if you are going to execute the job, those workflows will execute parallelly. So they will trigger at a time. Yes. But depends upon the resources. Yeah. So depends upon the resources. Maybe out of these two, maybe one complete first and second complete first. But if both are completed, then the job is saying that the job is successful. Getting my point? What I mean to say here?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, guys. So thank you very much for your time and patience.